welcome or welcome back to Life on the Fringe. Today, we are meeting with my cousin, who's going to be our guest. Cousin, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jamey. I'm an AFAB transgender man, and I'm Francesca's cousin.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking as part of our Pride Month interview series about being transgender. And Jamie's going to be talking about his experiences. And I wore my shirt to support. But obviously, like as someone who is not trans, uh, I, this is like something that I don't have as much experience with. Um, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation to learn more, and hopefully y'all will find this interview informative as well. So what do you feel like are some assumptions that people have about like transgender people, and then do you think those like are true or false or misguided?
Well, I think especially with like young transgender people, I think that a lot of people just automatically assume that they're confused and making a mistake, or that they're too young to understand their identity or like who they are, and like gender as a whole. And I think that that is one of the biggest things that I haven't really even been able to understand in terms of like I think that everybody has their own gender identity. And regardless of if you're transgender or not, you understand that at a pretty young age. And you continue to grow with that understanding, like through puberty and stuff like that. And I feel like that's a really bad misconception that people might have, is that young people don't understand themselves enough to have an identity. And they can, as long as it aligns with what they were assigned at birth. But as soon as it is different, it's a problem. And they aren't mature enough. They don't understand enough in order to, form that opinion. I think that that's a really bad misconception. And I think that it can hold true with some people, like if there are underlying, like mental health problems or like situations in their life that like probably need to be dealt with before considering transition, or medical transition. But overall, I think that if a person feels better, identifying as something else, why not? Like, I don't know.
Right, right. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point. And kind of building off of that, um, I think a lot of people's follow-up question would be like, so if, in your experience, how did you recognize that you were trans and you used he, him pronouns? Like, was that something you kind of like just
Yeah,
always knew
definitely.
or came to know?
Yeah, it was definitely something that I had to come to know because um, I think one of the hardest with being trans is that there isn't language available for kids to be able to express things like that. And especially if you have like your parents and family and stuff like that, if they prefer you to dress a certain way or act a certain way, and that is just seen as like almost a rule that you have to follow, it can be hard to say like I don't like this or I would prefer to do something else. But I don't think that I had so much of a semblance of understanding of like I would not be okay growing up and being a woman until I hit puberty. And so around age 12 was when I realized, and I just had so much distress around um, what was happening. It felt like my body was betraying me, that I knew from that age that I was not happy and could not even imagine myself living to live my life as an adult woman. Like I just I couldn't see it. I couldn't see myself having a good quality of life. Um, so yeah, I guess that's kind of how I knew, but I didn't have language for that until I had access to the internet. And I actually found out like what being transgender is and everything from YouTube. um, you know, but I, yeah, it was pretty much as soon as I heard it in the video, it something just clicked where it was like I didn't know that that existed. I didn't know that there was any way that I didn't have to just continue living like, the path that I knew I wasn't going to be happy with. That there was the possibility of transition. So
No, and I think that it's interesting that you mentioned like having a language, because I think that's very true across different identities, and I think that's one of the
mhm.
things I like, and what led me to do this series was I think YouTube, for so many of us and myself included, is the place we got all the language from. And so I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you're doing this video, because you know I just think that the more representation we can have,
Oh yeah.
especially on a platform that's free, the better. Um,
Hmm.
but so now that you are like an adult, becoming an adult, your birthday is coming up. Um,
Hmm.
what would you say that like looks like now, like being trans looks like now? So we talked a little bit about how like you were coming to understand yourself around puberty. How would you say your identity affects your perspective on life as an adult slash being adult, affects your identity as a transgender male?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think my identity has changed a lot from when I first came out. When I first came out, I thought that I was either non-binary or gender fluid, because I guess it was kind of just like a transition period for me to feel like comfortable enough in identity outside of what I was assigned at birth. I felt like, and this obviously was not true, but I felt like if I wasn't entirely male, then maybe more people would be okay with it because it was kind of like less extreme, which wasn't necessarily the case, but that's flawed logic. And now I've gotten to a point where I entirely use he, him pronouns, and I feel at peace with being male and identifying as male. Um, I think that one of the biggest differences in my transition going into adulthood is that this year I was able to start medical transition. So before that, and it was kind of just like, asking people to use certain pronouns, trying to wear the clothes that I wanted to, and do my best to present the way that felt the best to me. But now I'm actually seeing changes in my physical appearance, in my body, in the way that I feel emotionally, in regards to my gender identity. And that's really powerful. And something that obviously I wouldn't have had the chance to do if I was any younger than I am.
Mhm.
But honestly, I think really the only thing going into adulthood that's super different is now, especially with the politics around being transgender right now, I am faced with kind of a crossroads of, am I going to be openly transgender, with everybody I meet, or is it going to be kind of a secret? Am I going to go stealth? And that's a really difficult decision, that I don't know how to even think about making, because I know that, being openly transgender has a price, today, that, there are a lot of really scary things, and it's not always the safest to be out in every situation. So yeah, I think that that's one of the biggest things that I'm thinking about approaching adulthood and being trans is, I know that this is my identity and I know that this is where I feel the most peaceful, but what is the cost? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Mhm. No, definitely. And just for people who may not know, can you define like for yourself what going stealth means?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me personally, I will have top surgery scars. So people might find out, just because of the way that my physical body looks. But going stealth for me is I'm not going to volunteer that information to anybody. So if people ask me, it will be more of a, just I'm not going to answer that question, of deal. I'm just not going to be open about it. It's just, if you ask, you ask, and I'm just moving on. That's kind of what it is for me. Is just being seen as me before being seen as trans.
want to say for the record that either decision is a good decision because it's your decision. And
Yeah,
I think that, as you were saying, especially with the politics of today, um, like going stealth at any level, is a valid choice. Either for like
yeah.
personal like safety or for just your own like well-being, because it can be very exhausting being out all the time. Um,
Oh yeah.
and so for the record, I think either choice is going to be the right choice.
Oh
Um,
yeah. I think one of the reasons I really started considering going stealth is because in all of high school, I've kind of been the token trans kid, which is uh, it's not a terrible experience, but it does lead people to ask really inappropriate questions that they know they probably shouldn't ask, but it's asked anyways. And I think I'm kind of tired of being everybody's like almost trans dictionary, you know what I mean? Um, so I guess I don't really want that anymore. And also, I feel like, yeah, I'm think I'm in a stage of my life where I don't want to be defined by being trans anymore. Because that was a major thing in high school where like people knew me as the trans kid. Like that was the thing. And I want to be known for so much more than that. And I feel like if I'm open and out with everybody, that will end up being something that defines me in a major way. And I don't know how I feel about that. So yeah.
no, I think that makes perfect sense. It's like you mentioned, it's very frustrating when people put your identity before you as a person. Um,
Mhm.
and if people have those inappropriate questions, I'm going to be linking to a frequently asked questions sheet in my description. So you can just go ahead and click the link and see for yourself what the community has to say on those issues. Um,
That's great.
yeah,
I should just carry one around. You know what I
here,
mean?
take
Just
a,
in
take
case.
a flyer.
Here's a packet. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost think that should be like next year's Pride thing, is we all just carry flyers around, and
Oh
anytime
my
someone says
gosh.
anything inappropriate, we just hand them a flyer and walk
I
away.
wish.
Um,
It's not a bad idea.
no, it's not. It's not
Yeah.
horrible. Um, but yeah, so that'll be in this description below. Um, so you've talked about like puberty, adulthood. Um, do you feel comfortable sharing what it's like? Because puberty and adulthood bring with it dating. What has your experience been like in
Yeah.
that department?
Yeah. Dating is weird. It's definitely different. Mostly because I think everybody in my high school kind of knew that I was trans, so it wasn't something that I had to like approach telling them or coming out to them or anything like that. So I guess that was nice. That's something if I do end up dating other people in college, because I'm in a relationship right now, but if I do end up dating other people, I'll have to cross that bridge eventually. But I think that the one thing that is different is, okay, one thing that was kind of nice, it weeded out the jerks, because if anybody was even going to approach me about dating, I knew that they were at least okay with the LGBT community. So like there's one thing. But I think that I was also kind of um the transition for bi-curious guys
Hmm.
pretty much all of high school, which is an interesting experience. Yeah, basically, high school boys who did not know if they were gay or not would think, well, why don't I date somebody who makes it kind of gay in their eyes? And then I'll see if it's for real. So that's an interesting experience. Being approached with so many people that ask questions like that, like, but if I go out with you, is that gay? And the whole slew of everything that goes along with that. And I think that there was a lot of confusion with people, like if I were to date girls, that people would say we were in like a lesbian relationship, and things like that,
what
where like
advice would you give? You
my
talked about like having the
relationships started
respect
being
that
defined
you
by other
need
people
to
and not myself. And I think
like
that
have
that's
more
true
like
with
affirming
being
relationships. What advice would
sexual
you give
in
like
general,
kids
but
who
then you add
are,
on being trans on
you
top
know,
of it, and
questioning their gender
it's
identity,
interesting. Yeah.
or who have just come out like
Um,
this Pride
That
Month?
is
What is
yeah.
something that you would
absurd
say to those kids?
that people
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
date
definitely.
you for that reason.
Well, first in terms of
It's like
relationships, whether it be
absolutely
romantic
abhorrent.
or like with
I'm
family
so sorry that you had to
and
go
friends
through
and stuff
that.
like that,
What a nightmare.
have
It's okay.
really firm
I actually
boundaries.
only dated
And
one
this can be
person who
hard
had
when you're
that
still
assumption,
questioning
and
and
I
you don't
learned my
exactly
lesson
know what
very
you want
quickly.
your boundaries
It
to be.
was
But
quite
if
early
you
after
know
I
that you're
came out
uncomfortable with
I didn't
something,
have
or
a
you
lot
know
of
that you're
understanding
uncomfortable
of
like
the
answering a
self-respect that I
question
needed to hold,
or
and
being
the
put
fact
in
that it
any
wasn't
kind of position,
okay
as
to like
long as you're
be
in a
treated
safe
like that, you know,
space,
like
hold that.
I came
Back,
out like this is
because
my identity.
you
You
don't
either
owe
see
it
me
to
as male or you
anybody to
don't.
do
So
something
yes,
that
it is
makes you
gay if you date me
uncomfortable,
and you're
to
male.
do something that causes you distress.
So
Because
I guess
you know,
uh,
you are a person
yeah, I
just
guess that
like
was
they
one of
are. Being
the main
trans
struggles.
doesn't change your ability to say yes or no to something. So I think in romantic relationships, like one of the biggest things for me was like, I mean, there are so many people who would ask things, especially like sexually, where that can be kind of a problem with being trans, and you have to have really strict boundaries about that, about like what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. So I think that what's one of the main things, and I think maybe the other like bit of advice that I have is um, that there is going to be a point in time where you can look in the mirror and see yourself, because there was a long period of time. I came out several years ago, and there was a long period of time in which I didn't think that it was ever going to be achievable. Or I thought that it might happen really, really long down the road, but I didn't know if I was going to make it there. And I just think that one of the most important things to remember is that the space that you're in right now is temporary, and that there are options out there. There are going to be ways for you to feel peace, for you to make it. So I think that's probably the other advice, is just to try to stay hopeful.
Mm-hmm. And I think those are both very sound pieces of advice. And if people are struggling to see the future, I'm going to also link to the Trevor Project as well in the description, which is a free resource for LGBTQ plus kids. So or anybody in the LGBTQ plus community, but it was made for kids originally. So if you want to take advantage of that resource, it's in the description down below as well. And just to conclude, what would you say to what would be your advice to someone who wants to be an ally to the transgender community? Like what is something either you think they should be doing or read or educate themselves about? Like what would you say? What would you say is your advice to that person?
Yeah, definitely. I think
Totally
that it
not
can be
asking for selfish purposes.
um in terms of like reading or anything like that, I couldn't really tell you 100%. But I think that one of the biggest things for me is, even if you think that you're doing it in good conscience, don't question somebody's identity. Because I had so many friends when I would come out that would be like, but are you sure? That just, I don't know about that. And in the end, it's like, it's not your decision. And it's probably better to just like not say anything and just, you know, try to be respectful. And if it really bothers you and you think that they're making the most terrible mistake in their entire life, it's not your decision. Like, I guess maybe that's kind of the biggest thing for me. But overall, just respect and trying to make sure that if somebody tells you that they want to use a certain name, or use certain pronouns, try your absolute best to do that, especially if it's just like a simple change. And I know that it can be really hard. I have friends myself who have recently come out as transgender or non-binary, and it can be a transition even for me, with using a different name, using different pronouns. But the biggest thing is like when you make a mistake, just like quickly say sorry, correct yourself, move on, instead of making like a big deal out of it or just pretending it never happened, I think is maybe the other really big thing. Oh, other thing, don't tell other people information about a trans person. So like I have friends who, like, no fault of their own, didn't realize, but if somebody asked for example, my dead name, um, don't give that information out unless you have the explicit like consent of that trans person to tell other people that information. Don't even really, if somebody asks, like, it's not really your place to even tell somebody else that a person is transgender or questioning, or anything like that. I guess would be my other big piece of advice is coming out, and what information trans people want to share with other people can be a really big thing for safety. And any breach of that can be really scary. So that's one really big way to be an ally to somebody.
Yeah, and I think that, neither of those are difficult things to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, it's like respect somebody and don't out them. you know. So,
Mhm, mhm.
it's my final question then. So, for
Yeah.
teachers, what would you say would be the best thing for them to show that they're supportive of the community? What would you say is like a good thing for them to show support? Because I know like a lot of teachers are supportive, but they don't know how to show it without sounding super condescending. So, what would be some advice you would give to teachers who want to be supportive?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things that one of my teachers did, that I super respect her for, is on the first day, she didn't call everybody's names like as they were on like her seating chart or whatever. She just told everybody to sit wherever they wanted, and there were sheets sitting on our desks that said your legal name, your preferred name, your pronouns, and where you can use those things. And she did it for every single student. And of course, that there were lots of students who were like, this is stupid, like, and didn't understand. And her immediate response was, okay, well, then you can tell me what to call you, and I'm just going to use different pronouns every time because you won't tell me. And I think that that was super, super helpful because there were so many times where even though I'd email the teacher beforehand and be like, I use this preferred name and these pronouns, I'd really appreciate it if you didn't call this name during attendance, like people don't know this. It still happened so many times, like over and over and over again, with teachers who would later be supportive, but just didn't make that step. It's really great when you can just have a teacher that just, that's the default, instead of making the kid themselves go up and tell you about it and talk to you about it. I guess really the only other thing is if you do know a kid to be trans, I got misgendered and dead named a lot in class, and I had a lot of teachers did not know what to do about it at all whatsoever. And I think that it can differ for some students where like some students, they want to deal with it themselves, but there can be a point in which it's out of hand and there's just, you need an adult interference. I would recommend talking to those students if you can, and being like, if this happens in class, how should I deal with it? Or if I mess up your pronouns or your name in class, how should I deal? Because like I've had teachers in the past who have like accidentally dead named me in class because they had me a previous year or a previous semester, and just don't know how to proceed, like, and then it gets super awkward. I guess those are the two biggest things, are just basically communication and making pronouns and preferred name the default is super helpful.
Y'all,
Yeah.
or for me, you can leave them down below. Again, I'm linking articles below as well. If you want to just check those out with your questions, that's also a resource. But if you want to see more of videos like this or entirely different videos, because my channel is very random, click subscribe and ding the bell button to know when we post, which is every day. And I hope you have a happy, wonderful day and a very happy Pride. Bye.